This is a fictional drama story about Anna, a woman who believed she had the perfect marriage until one shocking discovery destroyed everything she knew. After 8 years of marriage, Anna walked into her own home expecting to surprise her husband with dinner. Instead, she found her husband holding newborn twins, and her own sister sitting beside him. She thought the betrayal couldn't get any worse. But when her mother-in-law turned pale and whispered, "She didn't tell you?" Anna discovered that the truth had been hidden for years. This is the story of betrayal, secrets, and one woman's journey to rebuild her life. My name is Anna Thompson, and for most of my adult life, I believed I understood what trust looked like. Trust, to me, wasn't built on grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was found in ordinary moments, the way my husband kissed my forehead before leaving for work, the grocery lists we scribbled together every Sunday, the quiet evenings spent watching old movies while arguing over which pizza place had the best crust. It was the certainty that no matter how difficult life became, we would face it together. Looking back now, I realize trust can be the most fragile thing in the world. Once it breaks, every beautiful memory becomes another question. Every smile becomes suspicious. Every promise sounds rehearsed. If someone had told me that the two people I loved most would destroy my life together, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it. My husband and my little sister? Never. That was the one possibility I never considered. I met David during my sophomore year of college. It wasn't one of those dramatic movie moments where two strangers locked eyes across a crowded room. We actually argued the first time we met. Our marketing department had been paired with the architecture school for a campus redevelopment project. David insisted the presentation should focus on design principles. I argued that people cared more about the story behind a project than technical drawings. "You marketers always think emotions solve everything," he teased. "And architects think blueprints are personality traits," I fired back. The entire classroom laughed. After the presentation, he walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. I figured if we're going to keep arguing, we might as well do it with caffeine. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekend dates. Before I realized it, I couldn't imagine a future that didn't include him. David had an effortless confidence that attracted people. He wasn't loud or arrogant. He simply made everyone feel like they mattered when he spoke to them. He remembered birthdays. He volunteered at community housing projects. He called his parents every Sunday without fail. When my father suffered a minor heart attack during our final year of college, David skipped an important internship interview to sit beside me in the hospital waiting room. "I'll find another opportunity," he said when I apologized. "You only get one family." That sentence stayed with me for years. It became one of the reasons I believed I had found the right man. After graduation, life unfolded almost exactly the way we had planned. David joined a respected architectural firm downtown. I accepted a position with a growing marketing agency. The first apartment we rented together was tiny. The kitchen barely had enough room for both of us. The bathroom door refused to close unless you lifted it first. The heating system sounded like it was possessed every winter. But we loved that apartment. Every paycheck felt like another small victory. Every piece of furniture we bought represented progress. We celebrated our first anniversary sitting on the floor because our dining table hadn't arrived yet. "We'll laugh about this one day," David said, handing me takeout noodles with plastic forks. "We already are." He smiled. "I love you. I love you too." Simple. Honest. At least that's what I believed. 3 years later, surrounded by family and friends, we exchanged vows beneath a white gazebo decorated with spring flowers. My younger sister, Mia, stood beside me as maid of honor. She cried harder than I did during the ceremony. "You deserve this," she whispered while fixing my veil. "I'm so happy for you." I hugged her tightly. "I couldn't imagine today without you." Those words would haunt me years later. Mia and I had always been close despite our differences. I was 4 years older. Where I planned everything weeks in advance, Mia preferred living one spontaneous adventure after another. She changed hairstyles every few months. She booked vacations without checking the weather. She adopted a rescue dog after meeting it once. Our mother often joked that she had raised 2 daughters with completely opposite instruction manuals. Still, we balanced each other. When I became too serious, Mia reminded me to laugh. When Mia acted impulsively, I helped clean up whatever chaos followed. She was my sister. More than that, she was my best friend. After our wedding, she remained a constant part of our lives. Sometimes she'd stop by after work carrying coffee and pastries. Sometimes she'd spend entire weekends with us, especially after difficult breakups. David never seemed bothered. "If she's family, she's always welcome," he'd say. At Thanksgiving, Mia insisted on helping David cook while I decorated the dining room. During Christmas, the two of them somehow always ended up assembling toys for younger cousins while I wrapped gifts. They teased each other constantly. I thought it was sweet. "You two gang up on me every holiday," I'd joke. David would grin. "Someone has to keep you humble." Mia laughed. Exactly. There was never anything that looked inappropriate. Not then. Or perhaps I simply refused to see it. 8 years passed faster than I expected. Our careers flourished. David eventually opened his own architectural practice with 2 partners. I left the agency and became an independent marketing consultant, which gave me more flexibility and surprisingly better income. Together we bought a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't enormous. It didn't need to be. The backyard overlooked a small wooded area where birds gathered every morning. There was a wide front porch where we drank coffee before work. Inside, sunlight poured through oversized windows into an open living room. I loved every corner of that house because we built it together. Or so I believed. Our neighbors considered us the perfect couple. Whenever community events were organized, someone inevitably asked us how we'd managed to stay so happy. David always answered first. Communication. I usually added. And patience. Everyone laughed. No one knew that we weren't perfect. No marriage is. David occasionally buried himself in work. I sometimes became obsessed with deadlines. We argued about paint colors, money, vacation destinations, whose turn it was to clean the garage. But we always found our way back to each other. Or at least, I thought we did. One evening, about 18 months before everything collapsed, I found David sitting alone on our back porch long after midnight. The porch light cast long shadows across the yard. "You okay?" I asked. He looked startled, almost guilty. "Oh, yeah. You've been out here for almost an hour." He rubbed his face. "Just thinking." "About work?" "Something like that." I wrapped a blanket around both of us. "You know you don't have to carry everything by yourself." He smiled weakly. "I know." That should have been the end of the conversation. Instead, I noticed his phone lighting up beside him. The screen flashed with a message notification. He turned it face down before I could accidentally read it. I didn't think much of it. Everyone deserves privacy. Don't they? Months later, little moments like that became more common. David started locking his phone. He claimed several projects required late-night meetings with clients. Sometimes he'd come home smelling faintly of baby powder. When I asked about it, he laughed. One of my clients brought her toddler to the office. It sounded believable. I never questioned it. Because why would I? Suspicion only exists when trust is already damaged. Mine wasn't. Not yet. Meanwhile, Mia seemed happier than she'd been in years. She'd finally found a stable job managing events for a local hotel. She spoke less about dating and more about work. Whenever I asked whether she'd met anyone special, she'd shrug. I'm focusing on myself. I'm proud of you, I told her. She smiled, though something about it felt forced. One Saturday afternoon she arrived unexpectedly carrying 3 bags of groceries. I've decided we're making lasagna. You decided? Yes. This is my kitchen. Our kitchen now. David laughed from the living room. I know better than to argue with Mia. The 3 of us cooked together for hours. Flour covered the countertops. Music played through the speakers. We laughed until my stomach hurt after David accidentally dropped an entire tray of garlic bread onto the floor. Our dog happily claimed it before anyone could react. If this is your secret plan to feed the dog expensive bread, I teased David, it's working. He laughed harder than I'd seen in weeks. At one point, I walked upstairs to answer a work call. The conversation lasted perhaps 15 minutes. When I returned, the kitchen had gone strangely quiet. David and Mia stood near the sink. They stepped apart almost immediately. You two okay? I asked. Mia answered too quickly. Fine. David nodded. We were just deciding whether the sauce needed more salt. I tasted it. It doesn't. We moved on. I forgot about the moment before the evening ended. Memory has a cruel habit. It stores insignificant moments until tragedy gives them meaning. About 6 months before my world shattered, David suggested converting our upstairs guest room into a nursery. We've talked about kids for years, he said one Sunday morning while measuring the walls. Maybe it's finally time. The suggestion filled me with excitement. We had postponed having children because of careers, finances, and timing. Now everything seemed aligned. We spent weekends choosing paint samples. Soft sage green. Warm cream. Light gray. I created online folders filled with nursery inspiration. David assembled furniture with surprising enthusiasm. He even built custom bookshelves. I want our child to love reading. Our child? I smiled. You sound confident. I am. I believed him. More than ever. We even began meeting with a fertility specialist after months passed without success. The doctor assured us that many couples simply needed patience. Nothing appeared seriously wrong. Still, every negative pregnancy test hurt. Every month brought another quiet disappointment. One rainy evening I found myself crying alone in the bathroom after yet another failed attempt. David knocked softly. Anna? I'm okay. You don't sound okay. I opened the door. He immediately wrapped me in his arms. We'll get through this. What if we can't? We will. I wanted this so badly. I know. He kissed my forehead. It'll happen. I buried my face against his chest. For a few precious minutes, I believed every word he said. I had no way of knowing that while we were mourning the child we couldn't conceive together, someone else was already carrying his babies. The following weeks became a strange mixture of hope and routine. Every morning David left the house just after 7, coffee in one hand and a leather portfolio in the other. Before walking out the door, he'd kiss my forehead and promise not to work too late. "I'll be home by 6, he would say. Sometimes he was. More often, he wasn't. At first I accepted his explanations without question. His architectural firm had landed several large commercial projects, and deadlines were tight. It wasn't unusual for him to spend evenings meeting contractors or reviewing plans. I was busy too. Running my own marketing consultancy meant juggling multiple clients, unpredictable schedules, and endless video calls. There were weeks when I barely noticed how many hours we both spent working. Whenever I mentioned taking a vacation, David would smile apologetically. After this project, there was always another project. Still, I convinced myself it was only temporary. One Friday evening I surprised him by bringing dinner to his office. I texted him from the parking lot. "I'm downstairs with your favorite Thai food." Several minutes passed before he replied. "Don't come up. Meeting with clients. I'll call you later, ****. The response felt oddly cold. I stared at the screen for a moment before turning back toward my car. As I drove away, I glanced at the office building. Most of the lights were off. Only one floor appeared occupied. I told myself the clients were probably using the conference room. That explanation satisfied me. Back then, almost any explanation did. Mia continued visiting almost every week. She had always been close to both of us, so her presence never seemed unusual. She helped decorate the guest room that we hoped would soon become a nursery. She assembled tiny picture frames. She folded baby blankets I'd bought during optimistic shopping trips. She even joked about becoming the world's coolest aunt. One afternoon she held up a tiny pair of knitted socks. "I can't wait to spoil this baby." I smiled. "You'll have plenty of opportunities." For just a fraction of a second, something changed in her expression. A flicker of sadness. Then it disappeared. "I hope so." At the time I assumed she was thinking about her own future. Now I wonder what she was really feeling. Spring arrived slowly. The trees outside our home began filling with bright green leaves, and neighbors spent weekends planting flowers along the sidewalks. Life looked beautiful. Inside, however, tiny cracks were beginning to spread beneath the surface. David had become strangely protective of his phone. He never left it unattended. If it vibrated during dinner, he'd silence it immediately. If I entered the room while he was texting, the screen disappeared almost instantly. One evening I laughed. "Who are you hiding from? The FBI?" He forced a smile. "Client confidentiality. Architects have confidential secrets now? You'd be surprised." The answer felt rehearsed. I let it go. Trust has a remarkable ability to silence doubt. My parents invited everyone over for Easter dinner. The house was filled with familiar smells of roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and my mother's famous lemon pie. For a while everything felt normal. My father argued with David about baseball. My mother fussed over whether anyone needed more potatoes. Mia played cards with our younger cousins. Watching everyone together filled me with warmth. This was family. Halfway through dinner, I walked into the kitchen to help my mother. As we washed dishes, she glanced toward the dining room. David works too hard. He does. And Mia seems distracted lately. I've noticed. You girls used to tell each other everything. I smiled. We still do. The words came out automatically. My mother nodded. I hope so. I had no idea how painfully ironic that conversation would become. A few weeks later, Mia canceled our monthly sisters' lunch. She claimed she had food poisoning. The following month she canceled again. This time it was a migraine. Then work. Then another excuse. Eventually I stopped asking questions. Everyone goes through difficult periods. I wanted to give her space. Around the same time, David suggested hiring contractors to finish the nursery. I've been too busy to complete it myself. I thought you wanted to build everything. I did. So what changed? He hesitated. I just want it finished. His answer seemed oddly urgent. Within 2 weeks the room looked perfect. Fresh paint. A white crib. A rocking chair beside the window. Shelves waiting to be filled with children's books. Standing in the doorway, I imagined holding our future baby there. David wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We'll fill this room soon. I hope you're right. I know I am. His voice carried absolute certainty. Looking back, I realize he probably wasn't talking about me. The first real warning came from someone I barely knew. Our next-door neighbor, Linda, waved me over while I was collecting the mail. I hope you don't mind me asking, she said carefully. Asking what? Was your sister visiting this morning? Mia? Yes. I don't think so. Oh. She looked uncomfortable. I probably saw someone else. What did you see? A woman getting into David's car. I laughed lightly. Mia borrows rides sometimes. Linda smiled politely. Then it's nothing. I walked back inside without another thought. David and Mia had always been friends. Why wouldn't they spend time together? It never occurred to me that Linda's timing didn't make sense. David had supposedly left for work hours earlier. Early spring also brought good news for my business. A national retail company hired me to oversee a major advertising campaign. It was the biggest contract of my career. For weeks I worked late into the night preparing presentations. David congratulated me with flowers. I'm proud of you. Really? Always. He kissed my cheek before returning to answer another text message. I noticed. Then ignored it. Again. As my workload increased, so did David's. Some evenings we barely exchanged more than a few sentences before falling asleep. One night I reached across the bed expecting to find him beside me. The mattress was empty. I found him downstairs sitting alone in the dark. Only the glow from his phone illuminated his face. You scared me, I said. He quickly locked the screen. Couldn't sleep. You've been saying that a lot lately. Stress. I sat beside him. Talk to me. He stared toward the backyard. I wish life were simpler. It can be. Not always. I slipped my hand into his. We'll figure out whatever it is. He squeezed my fingers. I'm sorry. Those two words lingered in my mind long after we returned upstairs. Sorry for what? I assumed he meant being distracted. Now I know better. Everything changed on a Tuesday in early April. A client meeting across town had been scheduled for noon. I spent the morning preparing documents, reviewing campaign numbers, and rehearsing my presentation. At 11:15 my phone rang. The meeting had been cancelled because the client's CEO had fallen ill. Suddenly my afternoon was free. Instead of returning to my office, I smiled to myself. David loved the little Thai restaurant near his studio. It had become our tradition whenever either of us needed cheering up. I ordered his favorite basil chicken, spring rolls, and mango sticky rice. The owner recognized me immediately. Surprising your husband again? I am. He's a lucky man. I smiled. I think I'm the lucky one. Carrying the warm paper bags, I drove home, imagining the look on David's face. I expected laughter. A hug. Maybe an unexpected lunch together before returning to work. Instead, the moment I pulled into our driveway, something felt wrong. David's car was parked outside. So was another familiar vehicle. Mia's. I frowned. She hadn't mentioned stopping by. Maybe they were working on another surprise for me. Maybe she had simply come over for coffee. I unlocked the front door. The house was unusually quiet. Then, very faintly, I heard the sound of a baby crying somewhere upstairs. I froze. My heartbeat quickened. We didn't have children. None of our friends had mentioned visiting. The cries came again. This time there were two distinct voices. Two newborns. Confused, I slowly set the takeout bags on the kitchen counter. Every instinct told me something wasn't right. Without calling out, I walked toward the staircase. Each step felt heavier than the last. The nursery door at the end of the hallway was slightly open. Soft voices drifted into the hall. David's. Mia's. And the unmistakable cries of two tiny babies. I reached for the doorknob. Then, with one trembling hand, I pushed the door open. Part 1, Section 2. The nursery door creaked softly as I pushed it open. For a heartbeat, my mind refused to understand what my eyes were seeing. David sat in the rocking chair we had picked out together months earlier. In his arms was a tiny baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Another infant slept peacefully in a bassinet beside him. Mia was lying on the daybed against the far wall, looking exhausted. Her dark hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she cradled a bottle in one hand. She looked toward me, and every trace of color drained from her face. The paper bag slipped from my fingers. The containers hit the floor with a dull thud, spilling noodles and sauce across the hardwood. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft cry of the baby in David's arms. David slowly stood. Anna. His voice cracked. It's not what? What? I interrupted quietly. The calmness in my own voice surprised me. What exactly isn't what it looks like? Neither of them answered. I looked from David to Mia, then to the babies. The little boy had David's dark hair. The little girl had Mia's eyes. 1,000 pieces of my life rearranged themselves in an instant. The late meetings. The hidden phone. The cancelled lunches. The sudden urgency to finish the nursery. Every memory that had once seemed harmless now carried a different meaning. Whose children are they? The question barely rose above a whisper. David closed his eyes. Anna, please. Whose children? Mia began to cry. They're ours. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. I grabbed the edge of the dresser to steady myself. Ours? I repeated. You mean yours and David's? She nodded. I'm so sorry. Those 3 words landed with less force than the truth that had come before them. I stared at David. How long? He rubbed a trembling hand across his face. It wasn't supposed to happen. That's not what I asked. Silence. Finally Mia whispered. Almost 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of birthdays. Anniversaries. Family dinners. Holiday photographs. Plans for children. Doctor appointments. Every smile. Every promise. Every lie. I looked at the nursery around us. The bookshelves David had built. The curtains we'd chosen together. The crib we had assembled on a rainy Saturday afternoon. It had never really been for our future child. At some point, he had already known whose babies would sleep there. That realization hurt more than anything else. I felt something inside me quietly break. Not explode. Not shatter. Simply, break. I don't even know who either of you are. David stepped closer. Please let me explain. I held up my hand. No. You deserve the truth. I deserved the truth 2 years ago. He stopped where he was. His shoulders sagged. I never wanted to hurt you. A hollow laugh escaped me. You had 2 children with my sister. Neither of them spoke. There isn't an explanation that fixes that. I turned and walked out of the room. Neither of them tried to stop me. Downstairs, I moved almost automatically. I pulled a suitcase from the hall closet. I packed clothes without really seeing them. Passport. Laptop. Medication. Phone charger. The essentials. When David came downstairs, he found me zipping the suitcase shut. Don't leave like this. I looked at him. Like what? Angry. I'm far beyond angry. I still love you. The words sounded almost absurd. You don't betray someone for 2 years if you love them. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I lifted my suitcase. If either of you contacts me tonight, I won't answer. I walked past him. He didn't follow. Outside, I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes before I could convince myself to start the engine. Only when I reached the end of our street did the tears finally come. I pulled into the parking lot of a hotel nearly 30 minutes away. Inside my room, I cried until I couldn't breathe. Every photograph on my phone felt like evidence from someone else's life. Our honeymoon. Christmas mornings. Beach vacations. Anniversary dinners. I deleted nothing. I simply couldn't bear to look. The following morning, I called a divorce attorney. I need to file as soon as possible. The woman on the phone spoke gently. We'll schedule you this afternoon. By noon I was sitting across from attorney Melissa Carter. She listened without interrupting as I told her everything. When I finished, she slid a box of tissues across the desk. You've already made the hardest decision, she said. Now we protect your future. For the first time since the previous afternoon, I felt the faintest sense of control returning. Over the next several days, David called more than 40 times. I answered none of them. His text messages shifted from apologies to desperate pleas. Please let me explain. I'm begging you. Don't throw away 8 years. Then came Mia's messages. She admitted the affair. She claimed they had fallen in love. She insisted neither of them had planned for any of it to happen. I blocked them both. Telling my parents was even harder. My mother stared at me in disbelief. No. I nodded. It's true. My father sat silently for several minutes. Finally, he whispered. Your sister? I could only nod again. The room fell silent. Nothing could prepare a family for news like that. Within days, relatives began hearing fragments of the story. Some refused to believe it. Others called offering support. A few suggested forgiveness before they even knew the full truth. I ignored every opinion except my own. The marriage was over. There was nothing left to save. Melissa advised hiring a private investigator to document the affair and locate any financial records that might become relevant during the divorce. I agreed. 2 weeks later, the investigator returned with a thick folder. Hotel receipts. Photographs. Shared bank transactions. Evidence stretching back far longer than I had imagined. Each page confirmed what my heart already knew. The betrayal hadn't been a single mistake. It had been a carefully hidden second life. The divorce papers were filed shortly afterward. David signed through his attorney. There was no argument over ending the marriage. Only over what remained after it. Then, just when I thought there were no more surprises left, David's mother called. Anna, Eleanor said softly, please, come to the house on Sunday. I don't think that's a good idea. There are things we need to discuss. I'm discussing everything through my lawyer. I understand. Her voice trembled. But some conversations can't happen through attorneys. Against my better judgment, and after Melissa assured me that attending could help clarify certain financial issues, I agreed. The following Sunday afternoon, I drove to the family home where we had celebrated nearly every holiday since my wedding. The familiar brick house looked exactly the same. I wished it didn't. Inside, everyone was already waiting. David. Mia. Richard. Eleanor. The twins slept quietly in matching carriers near the fireplace. No one smiled when I entered. I remained standing. I'm only here because this meeting was requested. Eleanor nodded slowly. I know. For several minutes, the conversation focused on practical matters. The divorce. The property. The future. Then I looked directly at David. You had every opportunity to tell me the truth. He lowered his eyes. I know. You let me plan a family while you were building another one behind my back. No one answered. I took a slow breath. When the divorce is finalized, I want no further contact with either of you. The room remained completely silent. Then Eleanor's teacup rattled against its saucer. Her face turned almost white. She looked first at Mia. Then at me. Her lips trembled. Finally, in a barely audible voice, she whispered. She didn't tell you? Every head turned toward her. I frowned. Tell me what? Eleanor closed her eyes. Tears filled them as she struggled to speak. Oh, Anna. She looked at Mia with unmistakable disappointment. There is so much more you don't know. Hashtag Part 2, Section 1. There is so much more you don't know. Eleanor's words settled over the room like a heavy fog. No one moved. Even the twins, who had been quietly sleeping in their carriers, seemed to make no sound at all. I stared at her, searching for some sign that I had misunderstood. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Eleanor looked toward Mia. "Mia, you should have told her." Mia's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I couldn't." "You should have." I said I couldn't. David rubbed both hands over his face. "Mom, please don't do this." Eleanor turned sharply toward her son. "Don't do this," she repeated, her voice trembling. "You destroyed your marriage. You destroyed this family. And now you expect me to keep carrying your secrets?" Richard, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "Eleanor." "No." She shook her head. "I'd been silent for far too long." I folded my arms tightly across my chest. "Someone needs to tell me what's happening." Eleanor took a slow, unsteady breath. "Anna. David and Mia's relationship didn't begin 2 years ago." My heart skipped. "What?" She looked directly into my eyes. "It began years before your wedding." The room seemed to spin. I looked from Eleanor to David. Then to Mia. Neither of them denied it. Neither of them even tried. "When?" I whispered. Eleanor answered quietly. "Shortly after you and David started dating." I laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. "No." "I'm so sorry." "No." I looked at David. "Tell her she's wrong." He couldn't meet my eyes. Instead, he stared at the floor. The silence became its own confession. My knees suddenly felt weak. I lowered myself into the nearest chair before I collapsed. 8 years. Not 2. Nearly everything had been built on a lie. Eleanor continued speaking, each sentence sounding heavier than the last. "Mia came to our house one evening. She was crying. Mia buried her face in her hands. She told us she was pregnant." The words echoed through my mind. Pregnant. Years ago. I looked at my sister. "You were pregnant?" She nodded without lifting her head. "I was 22. My throat tightened. "And David was the father?" Another silent nod. Every muscle in my body tensed. "What happened?" Eleanor answered. "We convinced her to end the pregnancy." The room fell completely silent. Richard closed his eyes. David looked like he wanted to disappear. We believed. Eleanor continued that everyone had made terrible mistakes. She swallowed hard. "We thought if the pregnancy ended, everyone could move forward." "You mean?" I whispered. "You covered it up." She nodded. "We paid the medical bills." I stared at her in disbelief. "You knew?" "Yes." "You knew before my wedding?" "Yes." "You watched me marry him?" Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "Yes." The word landed harder than any shout ever could. I slowly turned toward David. "My parents stood beside yours at our wedding." He remained silent. "They toasted our future." Silence. "They welcomed you into our family." Still nothing. "You looked me in the eyes and promised to love me forever." His voice barely emerged. "I meant it." I laughed again. This time everyone flinched. "You meant it?" "I loved you." "And my sister?" His shoulders sagged. "I didn't know how to end it." I stared at him. So you married me instead? It wasn't that simple. It really was. I stood. You had a choice. He nodded slowly. I know. And every single day after our wedding, I took another step toward him. You made that same choice again. He looked utterly defeated. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't regret it. You regret getting caught. No. I regret hurting you. I looked at Mia. And you? She finally lifted her head. I never stopped loving him. The sentence cut deeper than I expected. You loved him. She nodded. I tried to move on. While sleeping with my husband? Her lips trembled. It wasn't always happening. How comforting. She wiped tears from her face. When you two got engaged, I told myself it was over. But it wasn't. No. When did it start again? She hesitated. About 2 years ago. What changed? Neither of them answered. I looked toward Eleanor. She spoke quietly. They ran into each other after a charity fundraiser. David nodded. We talked. One conversation? He shook his head. It kept happening. So every family dinner. I looked at Mia. Every birthday. She cried harder. Every Christmas. No answer. You both stood beside me pretending nothing was wrong. The silence was unbearable. Finally Richard spoke. We all failed you. I turned toward him. You knew too? His face crumpled. I found out after Eleanor. And you agreed to hide it. I convinced myself it was over. You convinced yourself. I was wrong. I shook my head. You all decided what I deserved to know. No, Eleanor whispered. We decided what was easiest. Those words hung in the room. What was easiest? Not what was right. Not what was honest. Simply. What caused the least disruption for everyone except me? I suddenly remembered dozens of small moments. The private conversations that stopped when I entered. The strange looks exchanged across dinner tables. The awkward pauses whenever wedding anniversaries were mentioned. Had they all known? Had every smile been forced? Had every celebration carried the secret beneath the surface? I felt sick. I need some air. No one tried to stop me as I walked outside. The cool afternoon breeze hit my face, but it wasn't enough to clear my thoughts. I stood beside the old maple tree in the front yard. I remembered hanging Christmas lights on that very tree with David during our first winter as a married couple. We had laughed because neither of us knew what we were doing. Neighbors had complimented the decorations. Now every memory felt contaminated. A few moments later, Eleanor stepped onto the porch. She remained several feet away. I don't expect forgiveness. I kept my eyes on the street. You shouldn't. I know. You had years. I know. You watched me try to have children. She began crying again. I know. You sat in my house. Another quiet nod. You held my hand after every failed pregnancy test. I did. And you never told me. I was a coward. The honesty in that admission surprised me. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't asking for sympathy. She simply accepted responsibility. I'll regret my silence for the rest of my life, she said softly. I turned toward her. Regret doesn't change what happened. No. It doesn't. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally she reached into her purse and removed a thick envelope. I brought something. I looked at it cautiously. What is it? Copies. Copies of what? Bank transfers. She held out the envelope. Letters. She hesitated. And journal entries. I frowned. My journals? No. She looked away. Mia's. I froze. She kept journals? Eleanor nodded. She wrote almost everything down. My heartbeat quickened. Why are you giving these to me? Because you've spent years wondering if any of this was your fault. It wasn't? She looked directly into my eyes. No, Anna. Not even a little. She placed the envelope in my hands. When you're ready. Read them. I looked down at the papers. Without opening the envelope, I already knew one thing. The truth wasn't finished hurting me. Not yet. I didn't open the envelope until the next morning. It sat on the small kitchen table in my apartment all night while I stared at it from across the room. Part of me wanted to burn it without reading a single page. Another part knew I would never truly move forward if I spent the rest of my life wondering what else had been hidden from me. I poured a cup of coffee, took a deep breath, and carefully unfolded the first document. It was a copy of a journal entry in Mia's handwriting. The date caught my attention immediately. It had been written just weeks before my wedding. I told myself I would let him go. Anna deserves happiness. She has always protected me, even when I didn't deserve it. But every time I see David, I remember what we almost had. I hate myself for feeling this way. I turned to another page. Months later. Then another. Years later. Some entries described her trying to move on with other relationships. Others described running into David at family gatherings and convincing herself not to speak with him any longer. Then I reached the entry that changed everything. It was dated a little over 2 years before I discovered the twins. We met for coffee by accident today. We talked for almost 3 hours. He said he wasn't happy anymore. I should have walked away. Instead, I told him I still loved him. I closed my eyes. The words blurred through fresh tears. Another entry followed only a week later. We kissed. I know it's wrong. I know Anna would never forgive me. But I couldn't stop myself. Page after page revealed the same pattern. Promises to end the affair. Moments of weakness. More promises. More lies. Until eventually there were entries about a positive pregnancy test. Then an ultrasound. Then choosing baby names. By the time I reached the final page, I realized something important. Not once, not a single time, did Mia blame me. She blamed herself. She blamed David. She blamed fear. She blamed selfishness. But she never suggested I had failed as a wife. For months I had wondered what was wrong with me. The journals finally answered that question. Nothing. The betrayal belonged entirely to them. The divorce hearing took place 6 weeks later. David looked older than I remembered. The confident man I had married had disappeared beneath sleepless nights and obvious regret. When the judge asked whether reconciliation was possible, my attorney answered before I could. My client believes the marriage has suffered an irretrievable breakdown. The hearing was surprisingly brief. Most financial matters had already been settled. I received my share of our assets, and the house was ordered to be sold. As we walked out of the courthouse, David caught up with me. "Anna." I stopped but didn't turn around immediately. "What?" "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good. I only wanted to say." His voice faltered. "I'm sorry." I finally looked at him. For years I had imagined what I might say if this moment ever came. Instead, I found I had very little left to say. "I believe you're sorry." Hope flickered across his face. Then I continued. "But being sorry doesn't undo the choices you made." His shoulders dropped. "I know. I hope one day you become the kind of father your children deserve." Without waiting for an answer, I walked away. It was the last conversation we ever had. I moved to another city that autumn. Everything there was unfamiliar. Different streets. Different coffee shops. Different neighbors. Exactly what I needed. The first few months were lonely. I threw myself into work, often staying in the office until long after sunset. My therapist reminded me that healing wasn't a straight line. Some mornings I woke up feeling hopeful. Other mornings I cried because a song on the radio reminded me of my wedding. Little by little, however, the painful days became less frequent. I started hiking again. Joined a neighborhood book club. Volunteered at a literacy program on Saturday mornings. For the first time in years, I was making decisions that belonged only to me. Nearly a year later, I met Ryan. He taught history at a local high school. We met by accident after reaching for the same novel at an independent bookstore. "You can have it," he said with a smile. "I've already read it twice." "You've read it twice and still came back for it?" "It deserved a permanent place on my shelf." I laughed. "So now I have to read it." "You do." He never rushed me. Our first dates were simple. Coffee. Walks through the park. Farmers markets on Sunday mornings. Several weeks passed before I finally told him everything. I expected him to look shocked. Instead, he quietly listened until I finished. "That must have been incredibly painful," he said. "It was. Thank you for trusting me enough to tell me." No judgment. No unnecessary questions. No promises he couldn't keep. Just honesty. It was exactly what I needed. Occasionally I heard small pieces of news about David and Mia through mutual acquaintances. Their relationship hadn't survived the pressure of everyday life. The secrecy that had once connected them disappeared once there was nothing left to hide. Arguments became frequent. Trust, ironically, became impossible. Eventually they separated and focused only on co-parenting the twins. I didn't celebrate their unhappiness. There was nothing satisfying about watching lives fall apart. Too many innocent people had already been hurt. Especially the children. They hadn't chosen any of this. I hoped they would grow up surrounded by honesty rather than secrets. About 6 months after my move, Eleanor asked if we could meet for coffee. After thinking about it for several days, I agreed. She looked noticeably older than the last time I had seen her. "I wanted to apologize one last time," she said. "You already have." "I know." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "I just wanted you to know that keeping that secret is the greatest regret of my life." I believed her. Regret couldn't erase the past. But it sounded genuine. "I've spent a long time being angry," I admitted. "And?" "I'm tired." She nodded. "I understand." I don't think I can forgive what happened. You don't have to. But I also don't want to carry hatred forever. Tears filled her eyes. Thank you. We talked for another hour. Not about the affair. Not about blame. About books. Gardening. Travel. Ordinary things. When we said goodbye, I realized something surprising. Closure wasn't a dramatic moment. It was simply deciding that the past no longer deserved control over my future. Several years have passed since everything changed. Sometimes people ask whether I believe betrayal can make someone stronger. I don't think pain is a gift. I don't think heartbreak happens for a reason. But I do believe we get to decide what we build from the ruins. I built a quieter life. A more honest one. I learned that trust should never require ignoring your instincts. I learned that love without honesty cannot survive. Most importantly, I learned that another person's choices do not determine your worth. The life I lost was never as perfect as I believed. The life I built afterward is real. And that, in the end, made all the difference. Part 2, Enhanced Final Ending. Years passed after the divorce, and for a long time, I believed the hardest part of my story was losing David. I was wrong. The hardest part was accepting that the future I had planned so carefully was never real. The house. The family. The children I imagined raising. The life I thought I was building. I had spent months grieving something that never truly existed. But eventually, I learned something important. A broken dream is still a beginning. And sometimes the life you build after losing everything becomes more beautiful than the one you were trying so desperately to protect. 3 years after the divorce, I stood in the doorway of my own office, looking at the name printed on the glass. Anna Thompson Marketing Studio. My business had grown beyond anything I imagined. The small freelance work I started during the darkest months of my life had become a successful company with employees, clients, and projects I was genuinely proud of. I used to measure my happiness by whether someone else loved me. Now I measured it by how much I loved the life I had created. And for the first time in years, I was proud of myself. Ryan and I eventually built a life together. Not a perfect life. A real one. We disagreed about movie choices. We argued about whose turn it was to cook. We annoyed each other in small, ordinary ways. And somehow, those ordinary moments felt more romantic than anything I had experienced before. Because there were no secrets. No hidden messages. No second life happening behind my back. One evening, while we were cooking dinner, Ryan looked at me and smiled. You know what I love most about you? I laughed. There are many options. He smiled. You survived something that could have made you bitter, but you chose not to become someone you weren't. I looked down at the vegetables I was cutting. I wasn't always strong. I know. I cried a lot. I know. I was angry. Anyone would have been. I looked at him. Sometimes I still am. He nodded. That's okay. And that was the difference. He didn't try to erase my pain. He simply accepted that it was part of my story. A year later, I received a message from David. For a moment, seeing his name on my phone brought back memories I thought I had buried. My first instinct was to ignore it. But something inside me told me to read it. The message was short. Anna, I know I have no right to contact you. I just wanted to say that I hope you're happy. I finally understand what I destroyed. I wish I had valued what I had when I had it. I stared at the message for several minutes. Years ago, I would have wanted him to suffer. I would have wanted him to feel the same pain I felt. But time changes things. Not because what happened becomes acceptable. It never does. But because carrying anger forever only gives the person who hurt you another piece of your life. I typed one response. I hope you become a better person for your children. I have moved forward. I hope you do too. Then I put my phone down. And I never looked back. I eventually learned that Mia and David remained focused on raising the twins. Their relationship had ended long before I heard the final details. The excitement that once came from secrecy disappeared when reality arrived. Bills. Responsibilities. Parenting. Consequences. But I never wished harm on them. The twins were innocent. They deserved love. They deserved honesty. They deserved a childhood free from the mistakes of the adults around them. I hoped one day they would understand the truth without carrying the weight of it. 5 years after everything happened, I visited the old neighborhood for the first time. I drove past the house David and I once shared. Someone else lived there now. There were different flowers in the garden. Different curtains in the windows. A different family creating memories inside. At first, I expected to feel sadness. Instead, I felt peace. That house had once represented everything I lost. Now it represented something else. A chapter that ended. Nothing more. I continued driving until I reached the small park nearby. The same park where David and I had once talked about our future. I sat on a bench and watched children playing. I thought about the woman I had been back then. She believed losing David meant losing everything. She was wrong. She lost a person who lied to her. But she found herself. People sometimes ask me whether I regret those years. The answer is complicated. I regret the betrayal. I regret the lies. I regret the pain caused by people I trusted. But I don't regret becoming the person I am today. Because before everything happened, I thought strength meant never falling. I was wrong. Strength is falling apart and choosing to rebuild. Strength is waking up on the hardest morning of your life and still deciding to keep going. Strength is realizing that someone else's betrayal does not define your future. David and Mia took 8 years from me. They took my trust. They took the future I thought I had. But they did not take my ability to love. They did not take my dreams. They did not take my future. That belonged to me. And I finally understood something I wish I had known from the beginning. Sometimes losing the wrong people is the first step toward finding the right life. My story didn't end when my marriage ended. That was only the moment my real life began. This was Anna's journey from heartbreak to healing. A betrayal can change your life in a single moment, but it does not have to decide how your story ends. What would you have done if you discovered a secret like this? Would you forgive, walk away, or demand the full truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more emotional drama stories. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought was your future is the beginning of finding your true strength.